Is sense of purpose important for the moral life? What relationship does identity have to sense of purpose? Is our identity shaped by anything outside of ourselves? And if so, how does that impact the way we understand our purpose? All of that and more in today's video. What role does sense of purpose have in the moral life? At first glance, the two may not seem obviously related. If morality is a question of cultivating virtue and rooting out vice, which we've previously defined on this channel as habits of constructive and destructive behaviors respectively, then why would sense of purpose have a role to play? Isn't it sufficient for morality to do good things and avoid doing bad things, regardless of one's sense of purpose? While it's true that sense of purpose doesn't directly make someone more or less moral, it nevertheless plays an indispensable role in motivating us to act virtuously in accord with a comprehensive vision for our life. So far on this channel, we've explored ethical questions that have generally been black and white, involving a choice between that which is in accord with our nature and that which is against it. Many times throughout our lives, however, we will face choices not between something obviously constructive or destructive, but rather between a greater good and a lesser good. Two choices which, while both being constructive, could nevertheless impact our lives in drastically different ways. These kinds of choices, while still bounded by objective principles, introduce elements of subjectivity into our decision-making, since they are dependent on the particular circumstances of our lives. How then can we assess what is the best choice to make? Well, this is where sense of purpose factors in. Purpose, in the context of ethics and psychology, is the end towards which we direct our lives, the reason we do what we do every day. In decisions between two good actions, we can assess which option is preferable by determining how each choice would help or hinder us in the pursuit of our ultimate purpose. As a quick side note, some of you who are more philosophically astute may be wondering if the dynamic I've just described is a variation of situation ethics. For those who aren't familiar, to keep it simple, situation ethics is a school of philosophical thought that seeks to assess whether an action is moral based on the unique circumstances surrounding the action rather than in reference to universal rules. You may have encountered it before through the infamous trolley problem. A key difference I'd like to highlight is that, while situation ethics often seeks to deconstruct moral objectivity by examining whether there can be a universal moral imperative in a choice between two evils, the dynamic I'm considering is a choice between two good actions, wherein the goodness of both is determined by objective principles. So, returning to the main topic, what shapes our sense of purpose? How can we develop a vision for our lives that we know is constructive and fulfilling? We established in my Living the Good Life video that human nature is the ultimate determination of what is constructive and what is destructive, in more black and white scenarios. But what about cases that involve more subjectivity? Herein lies the relationship between purpose and identity. In order to know our purpose, i.e., what ends we should act towards, we must first have a concrete sense of identity. What then determines our sense of identity? Identity at the most basic level is an understanding of who and what we are. Much has been written about this topic by philosophers and non-philosophers alike, but one key contention is whether the question of who we are supersedes the question of what we are. Existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre are famous for the saying, "being precedes essence." To translate that from philosophical gobbledygook to everyday language, existentialists believe that humans determine their identity and meaning entirely through their actions, unbounded by any predetermined nature. Classical philosophers, on the other hand, argue that identity cannot contradict nature without running into problems. According to the philosopher Jean-Luc Marion, identity cannot be determined solely by subjective experience or self-perception, but rather is inextricably rooted in a shared common human nature that we inherit by virtue of being human. Which position seems most in accord with reality? Well, we can answer that with one simple question. Do humans have absolute, unbounded control over their nature? Or must humans contend with the fact that, even if it is inconvenient, there are certain elements of human nature that are simply raw facts of reality, whether we like it or not? While it can be tempting to gravitate towards the existentialist argument, since it seems to empower man to be so free that he can define his very nature, the philosopher Etienne de Gilson points out that our will is not so powerful that we can override objective reality. Rather, by virtue of the fact that we are human, we inherit a human nature, and to find fulfillment, we must learn to live in accord with our nature, since we cannot change it simply by wanting to. Failure to take into account objective human nature will not only lead to lack of fulfillment in our personal lives, but it will also undermine respect for the equal personal dignity that each person has by virtue of being human, as pointed out by the philosopher Karol Wojtyła. So, if our identity is fundamentally contextualized in human nature, where do subjective elements come in? Well, although humans share a common human essence, we each have unique characteristics and circumstances that, while not in any way contradicting our human essence, nevertheless distinguish us from other humans, making us uniquely ourselves. Many elements factor into a person's identity, such as nationality, occupation, familial background, passions and interests, etc. So long as these elements are organized in conjunction with human nature rather than against it, avoiding destructive extremes like racism, workaholism, blind tribal loyalty, and excessive recreation, for example, we will have a coherent and well-ordered sense of identity. This sense of identity can help us determine what ends we ought to pursue given our unique circumstances, contextualized by objective human nature. Leaving aside the more theoretical foundations of purpose and identity, what can we do practically to strengthen sense of purpose? Well, at the most fundamental level, we can strengthen sense of purpose by living with a sense of intentionality, letting our actions flow forth naturally from a well-ordered sense of identity. As many therapists will attest, one of the core problems people struggling with mental health face is a lack of a sense of purpose. To achieve a truly holistic sense of fulfillment, we must go beyond merely avoiding bad choices and making good ones. We must wake up in the morning knowing who we are and for what purpose we do what we do. Prioritizing what matters most is a necessity. Living intentionally can help us avoid the harmful extremes of lethargy and pointless chronic busyness, excessive recreation and workaholism, excessive consumption and excessive stinginess. People tend to turn to these actions when they lack a sense of purpose or fear the unknown. After all, it can feel easier to retreat into endless distractions than confront our ultimate purpose. Nevertheless, these kinds of behaviors lead to a lack of self-awareness, stagnation in our personal development, and very often, poor mental health. If you want a good test of how reliant you may be on distractions to get through the day, take a moment to examine how comfortable you are sitting in silence. Are you able to be at peace without constant stimulation? Or do you find that you must always be consuming something or constantly engaging in activity to feel comfortable? How comfortable you are sitting with your own thoughts may be a good intention of how intentional you are about your day-to-day life. So, what do you think? Is sense of purpose a key factor in the moral life? Is our sense of identity inherently bounded by our human nature? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified when new videos are released. Also be sure to like this video so that YouTube recommends it to others. If you'd like to support this channel for as little as $1 a month, you can also become a supporter on Patreon. Links in the description of this video. I look forward to the philosophical journey ahead with you. Wherever your life journey may take you, I hope that you and I may live our lives with intentionality, breaking through the vice grip of mundaneness and monotony to achieve the fulfillment we were made for. Peace be with you. This has been The Philosopher.